I think in this league, it's as hard to get a win on the road as any league in the country. When you come to Carbondale, you leave with a loss.
Southern Illinois. For 60 years, this has been your home for Saluki basketball.
It is no picnic when you come to play inside SIU Arena. They've got the numbers to prove it. Head coach Chris Lowery for Southern Illinois told us it's absolutely magical in this place.
Ball knocked out of his hands, got it back. 4 seconds left. Josh Warren, a three for the win. Backed it in with 0.7 left. Are you kidding me? Josh Warren backed it in. 0.7 seconds left. A fab. Southern wins. Southern wins. Southern wins.
This is Echoes of the Arena, 60 years of Benterra Center magic on the Saluki Royalty Podcast Network. Now, here is the voice of the Salukis, Luke Martin.
So great to have you with us here on this special podcast series that we are going to be doing throughout the year, as this is the 60th year of Benterra Center, SIU Arena on campus in Carbondale. So many great stories, so many great games, and of course, those great games don't happen without great coaches and great players. And throughout this year, there are so many to get to where we can't get to all of them, but we're going to do our best here throughout the year to just tell some of the best stories in the arena. And sometimes those will carry over the course of a year. The conversations will no doubt be centered about games and what transpired inside Benterra Center throughout the 60 years, but this series is going to go even deeper into the stories and the people that have made Saluki basketball matter to so many. And looking at this series as we were going through the planning process of it over the summer, the one we start off with are the ones you absolutely had to have. There is no question we should be starting with these men, because you look at the run that Southern Illinois had in the 2000s, it all circled around these men. And then when you dive deeper into their connections in the program, whether it's Rodney Watson, who's been a long-time assistant for Saluki basketball, from Coach Rich Herron into Bruce Weber, Matt Painter, and Chris Lowery, to Chris Lowery being a player for Coach Herron and Coach Watson, and then coming back to be an assistant for Coach Weber, and then, of course, Matt Painter being a consistent day one guy for Coach Weber when he got here. And then his year as the head coach is a year that everyone still talks about in Southern Illinois, nearly going unbeaten in Valley play, with a lone loss that year coming in Cedar Falls to go 17-1 in an 18-game Missouri Valley Conference stretch, and, of course, another NCAA tournament. Let's not waste any more time. Let's dive into the content that everybody is here to listen to, as our podcast series begins none other than with Matt Painter, Bruce Weber, Chris Lowery, and Rodney Watson. Well, these men don't need any sort of introduction to Saluki Nation and what all they have done for Saluki basketball. When you count all of their times, whether it be as a player, an assistant coach, head coach, or as Coach Watson as a broadcaster, 51 seasons combined between all of these men associated with Saluki basketball in some way. We'll start with you, Coach Weber. When you see all these faces, what are the first memories that come back to you just about this group specifically?
Well, when I look back, obviously Matt's had great success. Chris has great success. Rodney had great success. And I've had a couple pictures of that team, our teams, and even the players. Brad Korn's taking a team to the NCAA tournament. Marcus Belcher's coaching, Stetson Harrison coach, Kent Williams won a state championship this year. Brian Turner's coaching has had good teams. So we just had a good group of guys that loved basketball. They cared. And then just with these guys particularly, we took over when Coach Herron left, and it was not easy, and we didn't have much going on. And, they stuck, stayed the course, and, we just had a blast. I mean, it's some of my, favorite moments of my coaching career, and just the reward from where we started to where we ended with the arena, with the fans, everything. It's just great memories.
Coach Painter, how about for you?
Yeah, for us it was a little bit different, just kind of like how the start, happened, like, trying to get things figured out. I was at Eastern Illinois, so we were doing like day official visits, which now like people do now, like we were just kind of running guys in and out. I always say it's really hard to have a great team when you're just trying to kind of field a team in the summer. Like now with the rules, the way everything is, like things are always moving and shaking. But back then, if you were recruiting in June for the upcoming season, there wasn't a lot of guys left. And so it's hard to be special when you don't have a start. We had to have a start. And that's why like Monte Jenkins, Chris Tennell, Derek Tillman, Ricky Cullum was in that mix. Ricky Cullum really played hard and was a good leader and never said much, but always would fight on a game day. You got to have your start. You just do. And even though that season, you look back, I think we're like 5th in the league. That's what helped us get it going. And then being able to sign Kent Williams and Jermaine Dearman. Like that was our start. Like, so when I look at things at Purdue. We've been last place at Purdue twice when I've been a head coach. One was not my fault and one was my fault. And when you start over, man, you have to have substance. And those guys I just reeled off, even though they're not elite players, Monte was first team all league. I don't think anybody else was all conference. Then we were able to get that start, man, really helped us get going. And then getting Kent and getting Jermaine. And then anytime you want to do something special, man, you've got to have at least 2 classes on top of them, each other, or you got to, if you can stack 3. So getting Darren Brooks and like Jamal Tatum and Tony Young and all in that fray right there. Roland Roberts is obviously a huge piece. Marcus Belcher was a really good addition for a guy that you kind of got in May or June that started for you on a Sweet 16 team. So that's what I think of, because that's what Chris and I, still go through in terms of recruiting. Like, you got to be good enough, but you have to take production, and you got to take somebody that cares about winning, cares about other people. And that's hard to gauge as a recruiter. It's still hard to gauge. You got to put your time into it, but we were able to do that and then get off of it. And then your best recruiter is your success. And I think that's how they took off. And you really saw that, in Chris's years right there, like just how dominant they were. He was able to take it to another level defensively, to where like you'd watch TV and you'd be like, the team I coached didn't play that good at defense. Like, I mean, they became special. They became where they were suffocating people, where you didn't really know what to do if you couldn't handle their pressure. So that was really cool to be a part of, but it was also cool to watch when I went to Purdue and I was watching Chris as a head coach. Like that right there that's what it was about, because people don't realize this, like getting an at-large bid in a season at a mid-major level is really hard. We did it 5 out of 6 years with the people on this call here. Like, think about that. Like 5 out of 6 years. Like, we only won the tournament 1 time, and we're able to run Coach Weber doing it twice. Then I was there 1 year, then with 3 years, and then Rodney's there with all of those years. And so to be able to do that, and then Rodney was able to be part of that run when Coach Herron went 7 straight years, 3 to the tournament, 4 to the NIT. So if you take the start of Coach Herron's run to the end right there, like that's the golden era of Saluki basketball. And that's pretty tough to do, considering they won an NIT title. They've had a bunch of pros. So it's just, cool to be a very, very small part of it.
Coach Lowery, to kind of build off of that, as Coach Painter mentioned, the Rich Herron era, you were obviously a part of. That's where you got recruited as a player, when you kind of got this whole crew started to get to know one another with you and Coach Watson on that staff. Just remind people of what it was like for you coming in as a player, being recruited by Coach Herron and the staff and Coach Watson, and what you remember about your initial days there in the early 90s before you got it really rolling there to start off that three-peat.
I think the biggest thing is that I came at a time where, expectations were extremely high. When I got there, they were just coming off of winning the league and selling out the home games to finish the season. And, for me, I was nervous because I wanted to be a part of keeping it going. And I knew the pressure that was on Coach Herron to get to the tournament. And me being fortunate enough, I played for Coach Herron's a Hall of Fame coach. And the Hall of Fame players, Rick Shipley, Sterling Mahan, Marcus Timmons, Chris Carr, and eventually Paul Lusk. We were all, there at the same time, and to play with those guys and to see how important it was to get over the hump, and to be a part of that was just a huge, huge deal. And just thinking about, when I came back as an assistant and being able to work with these guys every day, we had so much fun. I mean, it was not about anything but winning and having fun, and there was a lot of jokes, and there was a lot of times where we had really, really hard practices with guys, and they fought through some things to get better. And there's no reason for people to doubt what was happening there. As you've seen Coach Weber leave, all of us became head coaches, and I told Paint, you got second, man, in the country. I mean, that sucks. That's a hell of a deal, last year. And to know, what they were going through that whole season, it's special because you feel a part of it. Because when you've been with somebody, when you work with them, you know how they are, and you know what they're thinking and how they're working, and you know what they're promoting to their players every day. And it started from Coach Weber. It started from Coach Herron promoting stuff to me that I could be anything I can be. You're going to get a degree, promising my grandmother that I was going to get a degree, all the way to watching, Coach Watson become a head coach and be dominant at USI, to watching Coach Weber playing the championship game, to watching Coach Painter playing the championship game. I mean, this family is real. I mean, and Paint said it. You have to have the right people in your program to be able to do special, special things. And it's not always about talent. And Southern Illinois attracted good players, and it's an amazing thing. It really attracts the type of that shouldn't be there. And, I played with guys that probably shouldn't have been there. And, we coach guys that probably shouldn't have been there. In this day and age, all of our redshirt good players would have left. I mean, they would have got paid somewhere else. And that's how good those guys were. DB would have never been back-to-back player of the year in the Valley. He would have been one, and he'd been in Mizzou. He'd been somewhere else. And that's how good of a players that we had. That's a credit to the guys, on this call.
Coach Watson, to you, I mean, as you kind of alluded to, I mean, we've talked so much just about those years with Coach Herron and what you have taken away so much, and through our radio broadcast when we have that time, that initial period. I mean, how important, I mean, we've talked about Ostroff, so many good players during that time, as Coach Lowery mentioned. How important of a piece was Coach Lowery himself to you guys finding the right jigsaw puzzle to get that ultimately figured out?
Yeah, there were three guys at different starting points. When they got there in '88, it was kind of like what Coach Weber inherited in '98. It was a starting point. Southern Illinois was starving to go to postseason play. They were talking like it was yesterday that Walt Frazier won the NIT and Mike Glenn went to the Sweet 16 in '77. And all three of my friends here all have heard those stories back in the spring and summer of '98. But I think there were three guys that helped get the program restarted. One, and they all three happened to be point guards. One was Kai Nurnberger. Coach Herron had coached him at Benton High School, and Kai came and played for Coach Van Winkle. And when Coach got the job, he inherited Kai, and Kai goes on to be the point guard for the German Olympic team and got beat by USA and Michael Jordan. And he's not in the Hall of Fame, and he needs to be. The next point guard happened to be a guy from Evansville. I remember Sam Weaver said to me, hey, because I couldn't recruit at the time. And Sam goes, hey, make some phone calls. These guys will kind of get you involved in it. And so I'm calling this guy from Evansville. And basically I could only get a hold of his grandmother. And Chris Lowery's grandmother knew more about SIU than I did. I mean, she was telling me about SIU history. And it was awesome to call and talk to her. Then you get Chris, and, Chris shows up and for his visit, you're like, oh man, he's a kind of a small point guard. Okay, is this really going to be the deal? And man, when he got his freshman year, and we're in his freshman year, we're playing at the Old Style Classic. Green Bay was supposed to have got beat by DePaul, and they upset them. We were supposed to get beat by Oklahoma State. We upset them. And then the wrong guy gets the MVP of the tournament. It should have been Chris Lowery. And so you get Chris Lowery, but the guy that Coach Heron, that Coach Weber brought in, again, kind of unassuming, but I think the best player in that era, the most important player in that era that people never talk about, and again, another guy that should be a Hall of Famer, is Ricky Cullum. I mean, here's a guy, when he came on his visit, it was like the miracle van. The whole family comes, about 11 people pile out of this van. We get Ricky Cullum, again, kind of an undersized point guard. Okay, not real athletic, nothing real, anything about him, until 2 years later, you realize how many games we won, how he led. And Coach, correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't think Ricky Cullum ever took a playoff in practice. Literally, one time he cracked his head, said a few choice words, got back up, rubbed it, and said, "Let's go." But I think Ricky Cullum, Chris Lowery, and Kai Nurnberger really helped with the restarts and the continuation of making this thing go.
You know, before we move on to Coach Weber officially taking over in the timeline, Chris, you know, one of the things that you mentioned to Mike Reese on your Hall of Fame night when you got inducted was that year when they finally broke through in '93. It was fun. It was not fun until we cut the nets down. And you're really implying of the type of pressure, and you kind of implicated that too in one of your answers earlier, the pressure that was on you guys that season. How do you describe the type of pressure that was on that team specifically, and how you guys really shouldered that throughout that year until you finally broke through?
It started the year before my sophomore year. We won the league, and we got upset in the tournament by Tulsa. And then that whole summer, it was just like really, really pressure packed. And then my junior to finally do it. I just remember just sitting there, everybody's jumping up and down. I just sat on the bench. You know, you're just exhausted from the pressure of knowing that we have to do this for Coach. You know, we have to do it. And, you know, I can remember Rick Shipley being on the call, and he was emotional because it was, everybody wanted to do it for him. It was not about us, because, you know, I think it was 4 straight NITs at that point, and we couldn't go again to the NIT. So doing it for Coach, and I remember the picture with his hands spread out, and the newspaper said finally, and you know, just being so happy for him. And from there, he became Mr. Three-Peat, and me and Coach Watson would laugh about Mr. Three-Peat. But that first one was big time.
Coach Weber, when you took over at Southern Illinois in '98, kind of give us a perspective of like what your first 30 days were like when you took over the program, and not even necessarily from a basketball perspective. You know, for me, I can walk and I can see what Saluki Stadium looks like right now and how campus has really boomed, you know, and Coach Hill's done a great job in recent memory here with football and getting that going. But just in terms of everything with the campus, including the basketball program, what were your first 30 days like, and how you kind of encompassed and took everything in for the program?
Well, I think Matt talked about it. I didn't get the job till May 5th. And we probably had, 4 or 5 guys on the roster. And I guess as looking back, I called Coach Katie after I took the job. And once I got there, and I said, "Coach, maybe I should come back. We don't have enough players." And Matt talked about it, and they've talked about Ricky Cullum. Ricky Cullum, on the way to the press conference, I called Ricky, and, I think he was really key, but Matt alluded to it, Ryan Hammer, Chris Tennell, Lance Brown, Monte, Derek Tillman, those guys, they were rock solid guys that bought in, and they would do anything, and they created the culture for the next group. They weren't great players, and I'll be honest, I didn't know if we'd win a game. Somebody said, "Oh, if you win 4 or 5, that'll be a good year." And then, we ended up, winning whatever, 15, 16 games. And, but it was hard. We all have stories. It was a transition from Coach Heron, who was Southern Illinois, from the high school and we just didn't have much. We didn't have a budget. We didn't have a roster. Matt and I, we stayed in the quad and we walked to work. Rodney rode his bike sometimes. We didn't have cars to pick up recruits. Nancy Dennison was our administrative assistant. She let us use her car when we had recruits come in. And but as Matt said, we had one day visits, and we just figured out once we got guys there, we had a lot to sell. And we always joked about Giant City and the 17th Street Bar and Grill. We had the food, the campus was a good place. The people loved it. But I think the key is, as Matt's talked, Chris and Rodney, just the quality guys that we had to start that led to the next group. And it just kind of all blossomed. I can't remember. I used to remember, and these guys, I think we had to sign like 17 players over like a 3-year period. And I don't know if, there was a rule that at one time you could only sign 5 in, 1 year or something, or there was some rule 8 and 2 or something. So if that rule is in place, there's no way we could have done anything, because that whole group, the Monte, Ryan Hammer, Lance Brown, they all graduated. So we had to get those first group to add to them. And then they all graduated. You had to get another group, and we lost a couple guys. So it just, but we were fortunate with the guys we got. And I can't say it, to get Kent Williams, when we talk about building culture, to get a solid guy from Southern Illinois that became one of the best players in the history, that was really, really important. But, it was a blast. I mean, Matt sharing an apartment with Alan Major, and just, we made a lot out of nothing, to be honest. And then it built and built from there. And I still remember Matt kept saying, "Coach, don't have Midnight Madness." And the players wanted it. And so I just said, Matt said, "This can be embarrassing. No one's going to show up." And there weren't many people there. But our guys had a blast. And I think Monte's the only one that made the dunk in the Midnight Madness. And JJ got hurt trying to dunk. So
he blocked his own dunk in the dunk contest.
But from there on, I mean, I still remember my last game there. The last couple games, Creighton and what was a Bradley, I believe. They were sellouts, and from one extreme to the next. It was pretty cool to watch the progression.
It's not uncommon, Coach Weber, and for everybody here, obviously in the coaching business, to see when there's a coaching change to retain somebody on a staff and keep them there. When you were looking at building your staff, Coach Weber, what was so important about, one, getting Coach Painter to come over with you, but also to retain Coach Watson? What was initially like, I feel like this is really a good fit for our staff?
Well, Jim Hart had asked me to really consider keeping Rodney. And the crazy thing, Rodney had worked camp at Purdue years and years before that. So I knew him. I always thought it was important to keep somebody there that knew the culture, knew the campus, knew the returning players. And I just told Rodney, "Hey, stay here. I'll give you 30 days and let's just see what we can do." And it just, I really had thought I was going to keep him anyway, but I just said, let's just kind of see what happens. And, it just worked out perfect. And, Rodney talked about somebody else, Kai Nuremberg, trying to get in the Hall of Fame, but Rodney should be in the SIU Hall of Fame. He's been part of all the wins, the championships, the tournaments. I know it was as assistant, and I was a longtime assistant for Coach Katie. I always felt I had an important role there, and I know Rodney had an important role for all of us. And he was huge. He gave us stability. He knew what was going on. Chris talked about us having fun. I mean, we had a blast. I mean, it was just, and we all had different personalities, and but we all enjoyed each other, and the guys bought into it. And it just, as I said, I've been through a lot of special wins and going to Final Four and winning a gold medal with USA Basketball, but watching that development at SIU and being part of that was really one of the most rewarding things I was part of.
Coach Watson, from your perspective, what were your initial thoughts and how you felt about getting to know Coach Weber, Coach Painter, and what that was like? Like, I can see myself staying here. I want to work for these guys.
Oh man, I was addicted to Southern Illinois. I was there for 10 years, and I was part of the good years. I was part of screwing it up too. And I remember getting a chance to go into Coach Weber's office a couple of days after he got in there, and we were going to talk about the job. And I thought, man, I prayed to God that I said the right things, literally, that some wisdom came out of my mouth. And I remember saying to him, I don't know if I'm part of the problem or part of the solution, but I want to help you as long as you want me here. And I know you've got to create your own staff. And I think maybe that helps some, but it didn't take long to be around these guys to know that, man, this is something different that's really good. Coach Herron's thing was great. And I'm telling you, SIU is for you or it's not for you. And you know pretty quickly once you're a part of it. So I wanted to continue to be a part of that. But you have no idea what's coming next. I asked a friend of mine when he considered the people on this podcast, when you look at the four of us, say, when you looked at us back in that day and we were having success, did you think we were a good staff? Because people look at Scott Nagy and say, hey, I think we've got a good staff here. And I said, well, that same person, I go, do you think that was a good staff? And he goes, no, I didn't say it was. I didn't think it was a good staff or a bad staff. And you don't know those things. And then I know you're going to talk a little bit later about what the four of us accomplished collectively. And man, as they've all said, it was fun. It was a lot of fun, to the point where I was hoping someday I'd get my own gig. And if I did, I really wanted to emulate the enjoyment of coaching. I mean, coaching has its challenge like any profession, but man, you've got to have fun. And that's the thing that Coach Weber and Coach Herron, they are all about having fun and enjoying it. And you had to work hard, but it was something I definitely wanted to be a part of.
It's funny. I know most fans probably know when they hear Synergy and hear about all the programs now that you can see all the analytics, the scouting metrics, how you can put together scouting reports in today's day and age for basketball. That's exactly what it was like for you and Rodney back in the day, right, Coach Painter, of how you guys would put together the scouting reports. I can remember so many times throughout this past year where Coach Watson and I would be watching a film session with Coach Mullins, and he would just either lean to me and go, you know what, this is exactly how Matt and I put together a film session back in the day. What were some of your favorite stories of doing those scouting reports with Coach Watson?
Just, back then with your VCR, so they had two VCRs on top of each other. So you had one on record, then you had one on play with the pause. So you didn't, when you like something in a game, you did it in the sequence of that game. So you didn't split it up into out of bounds plays. You didn't split it up into offensive bad shots. You just ran a game and clipped it. So it came in a sequence. Then when you got to the next game, you just ran it. So then there was no putting it together, so like you can like clip it so the guys aren't in there for a long time. That's what I remember. That was kind of the end of that at that time, but everybody was doing it that way. Maybe they were a hair more sophisticated than we were, but that's how we clipped the things, which is very, very archaic. But at the time I can't give you the description what I actually called it on air, but it was good times. Like you'd go in there and just take your shoes off on a Sunday and say, okay, I got Creighton. And then you look and say, okay, I got to watch these 7 games, 8 games. And you just motored through them. And then you just got to it. And then you just you felt like, man, like, okay, we can piece this together and really give ourselves a chance and stuff. But I've always enjoyed that. I enjoyed being a assistant coach way more than I do being a head coach. I don't like answering to everybody. And so the fact that it was basketball driven and then Coach Weber would take off my plate. I think one time I was supposed to schedule, I was scheduling and I was not doing a good job. And he just goes, I just wanted to recruit people and I wanted to coach people. Well, the job entails other things. And you have to do other things or you're not going to have guys eligible and you're not going to have people on your schedule. And Coach Weber, that was his way of yelling at me. He just took it over and just ran. I said, well, at least we'll have good players and we'll have a good game plan. I go, because I've really dropped the ball in those areas. But no, that was the best time for me because I enjoy being an assistant coach more than anything. I like the categorization. I like that piece of it. And so like I do a lot of that right now to where I love jumping into recruiting, a part of recruiting, and I love piecing things together and I love coming up with a game plan. Like that's cool to me. All that other stuff isn't cool. Like I don't like all that other stuff. So, but that right there as an assistant coach, you just die to be a head coach. And then you get there and you're like, oh man, I'm not going to have as much fun as those dudes are, but the check's obviously a little different.
Well, we could probably have a separate podcast for hours on hours of the difficulties of recruiting and trying to find the right fit to your programs. And all of you have probably those stories of guys that you found that were diamonds in the rough to guys you thought would work out and didn't work out. But what was it about Kent Williams, Coach Weber, for you that you knew you called him? Hey, he was our franchise guy. Like, he was the guy that really kind of stirred the drink to kind of keep everything going and took it to a level. What was it about his intangibles that you did notice through the recruiting process that you felt this guy's going to be the right fit for us?
I think these guys would tell you, I'm pretty sure that he was one of the hardest workers that any of us, ever coached. And he just was so driven, and it didn't matter what we put in front of him. He wanted to be successful at it. And there was a drill where I think I got it from Dirk Nowitzki. You got to, you give them a time, like it was 100 threes in 10 minutes, and you got to make 100 threes. And Kent went so hard that he threw up after. I mean, it kind of just shows you what he's about. I went and spoke to his camp the other day, and we had this thing, these little gadgets where you got to get low. It's called the shoot. And then Coach Watson would take pads out and start beating the heck out of them. And then we gave him weighted balls, and, he just kept adding it up. And it didn't matter what you threw at Kent, he was going to fight through it. And he just wanted to win. He was this off the court. He was this polite Christian guy that, but on the court, this dude was another level competitive wise.
Coach Lowery, when you finally rejoined everybody here in 2001, 2002 for your first season as assistant on the staff, when you think of those years, what was the lead up like for you when you came back? And of course, Coach Weber talked about the importance of those early guys. You come in, that was the first year. I believe you guys finally got to the NCAA tournament. What do you remember about just the buildup of you coming back to join these guys and the expectations that were really starting to set in?
I mean, the first thing I remember is my first meeting, and what made it funny is that we go in Coach's office, Paint's on the ground, on the floor, laying with his shoes off. Rodney gets the chair, and then my only place is the floor beside Paint. So we sat on the floor. Coach Watson sat in the chair, and Coach Weber sat at the desk. And I was like, "Damn, I thought I was going Division I. At least I had my own office when I was Division II." So that was the funniest thing. I was just like, "What are we doing in here?" And those were our meetings every day. Paint on the floor with his shoes off. And that we had so much fun. And then Paint would finally tell Coach Weber, "Hey, we got to eat. Like we got to go to lunch. We can't be in here all day. We were going to go to practice." So those are the things that I remember that led up to the basketball side of it, and that's what makes it easy. I just remember in Kent, like the first person you notice when you get to Southern Illinois at that time is Kent, because his work ethic was different, and he was your Southern Illinois kid that everybody loves, because when there's a player from Southern Illinois and he goes to the university, he gets treated different. The spotlight is definitely on him, and to deliver and to be successful and to be a great player. And Kent relished that. He went about it like a grown-up. Like, he went about it so mature. And then you notice Jermaine. he was completely opposite. He was the life of the party. Sometimes his hair would be braided, sometimes it wouldn't. And either way, Coach Weber was mad at him. So it didn't matter if it was braided or unbraided. He was going to get it that day. But those are the first two people you notice. And then when we got going, the freak of nature was rolling. Like, I never seen a guy this size jump that high. Be such an intimidating force defensively at only 6'5", 6'6". I was like, man, I think we got a chance to be good. And obviously seeing that in practice and we didn't know that Stetson and Darren would be that. I think you knew those three, and along with Belcher, and Sly was just the team comedian. So, he always kept it light, but the player side of it, they had recruited well, and getting Roland Roberts changed everything. And to finally see that practice and to see the talent that was back there was refreshing. And I remember like going home thinking, man, we're going to be good. I didn't know Sweet 16 good, but I just said it's going to change.
This is for any of you who want to hop in and tackle this, but Coach Watson and I were talking about this the other day. I know everyone could see what all of you did eventually as head coaches and look at your records. And it really is astonishing. And we'll get to those numbers when we wrap this up. But all of you came really from humbling beginnings when you look at your coaching path. And there were no doubt probably some early days that still really stick with you. Is that what made this staff special? Is you guys could talk about your different personalities, but it's the fact that all of you came from really humble beginnings, that there was not a job that you guys did that wasn't too big enough for you. Do you feel that's what made this group really special for anybody that wants to take it?
I'll take it. I think for me, like, especially in today's landscape, like what I learned more than anything was like I've been in the most time I've spent with head coaches is Coach Weber and Rick Samuels at Eastern Illinois. And like I just didn't know how good I had it because they taught me how to work, they taught me the game. But they also, it's kind of a tough statement, right? Like they taught you to work with integrity. Like it was, and that's something that goes unspoken. It's not like someone like, they're not our parents. They're not going to yell at us but they just, how they live their life, how they did the job. And then you see people out there that, they get taught the other way to cut corners and to buy kids and to do that. Because what happens is like 99% of college players aren't pros. And these opportunities to get a scholarship should change your life, should definitely pivot in your life, especially somebody that grows up, single parent home, lower socioeconomic background, like opportunities to get a scholarship. And it's your job as a coach, to help those people to instill the, right and wrong and things like that. And I know that kind of comes off hokey, whatever, but like, I didn't realize how well I had it because those are the two guys I were around and they were good people and they treated people the right way and they didn't cut corners and they set the right example for guys. And so I probably took that more than anything from my 9 years in Illinois at Eastern and Southern Illinois with Coach Weber and Coach Samuels, the way they were. Rodney was connected, with Coach Samuels. We all have people, obviously, with Coach Heron. And so, though, your impact on people is huge, and don't ever take that for granted. And I always try to tell them in a meeting, our staff now, to where it's like, nothing really should be said in this meeting that can't be said in front of them. I go, just be honest with them and be straightforward with them and help them and understand the big picture for them. And I think that's what we did. And I think you see that later in life with the connections that you have with those guys, because you don't have great relationships with every single solitary player you coach going on in life. You just don't. But you want to be impactful. So all those names that have come up, I think we put our best foot forward at Southern Illinois and did what was best for the program, but we also did what was best for them. And then the people that, that helped with that, like you don't do that by yourself. Like the Roger Tedrick, the Greg Cook, the Steve Wells, the Dozier, Doc Knapp, Ed Thompson, Mike Reese, Bill McMahon. Bill McMahon was huge for us. Like he'd do anything for us over there at the rec and helping us, Seymour, Dr. Bardo, they mentioned Jim Hart, Paul Kowalczyk. So like if that court, I'm probably leaving out a couple people, but Coach Weber brought up 17th Street in Giant City. So I'm a fat dude, so I like lunch. So like that was huge for me. But like those more than anything, the players and the people I just reeled off, and then in the fashion that we did it. Like anybody can have a good team, anybody can cut corners, but like it's hard to do things the right way. But the benefit at the end and what you instill is what it's all about for young people.
I was just going to say one of the things that when you build a staff, you have roles on the team. You always talk about this, this guy's your shooter, this guy, but you have to have roles as a staff. And we didn't have much support around us, to be honest. We had one manager, I think Matt Wadsworth, and, everyone had to do it. We were setting up the court. We were whatever. Everyone had to do something. And I think we had great camaraderie as far as the roles. And then, Matt brought up those people. If we didn't have those certain people helping the program, we had no chance. I joked about cars and Matt and I walking and Rodney riding his bike. I got a call one morning. I answered the phone and the person says, Rodney's going to be late for work. And I was like, who is this? And he said, well, I just drove by Rodney on Highway 13 and his bike broke down and he was carrying it back to his house. So I think he's going to be late. And so, I mean, we just, we made do, and made, we made the best of it and figured it out. And those certain people helped. But the thing and Rodney's brought this up, I believe it's a true fact because he said it, that I think there's a 5-year period where every player won a championship and also a championship ring and also got a degree. And Matt kind of talked about the importance of that. And with all those, and these guys have all been successful. I talked about a lot of them in coaching, but a lot of them have been successful in life also that haven't gone to coaching. So, that's the proud thing, not only what these guys have done, the coaches here, but also those players and what they've done. It's important.
Coach Watson, I would like for you to explain what it meant to you to be a part of this staff and the level of fun and enjoyment that you have described so many times on our car rides and trips that we've had. Why do you feel that way about this group?
Well, I think it goes back to what we were talking about just a little bit ago, and it really starts with Coach Weber and his college coaching career start at Western Kentucky, where he's a graduate assistant, went on with Coach Katie to Purdue, and he would just share with you the things that he did. And then Matt Painter played at Purdue and went to Washington Jefferson with Coach Ryder. And I know at that level, all the things he had to do as an assistant starting out. And Chris Lowery very well should have played in the Big Ten, but he fortunately played for us. And then he goes to Wren Lake as an assistant, where he's running the weight room and all the things that he was helping Tim Wills do. And I'm surrounded by dudes that were really, truly blue collar guys. And it really starts with Coach Weber's personality in that bunch. And because there's no task that was above us. And that started with Bruce, that's the way it is. And I tried to take that concept with me to Southern Indiana. Sometimes I was okay with it. Stetson will probably tell you I wasn't okay with it. But it's not easy to do, to be humble and do the work. But what's important about that is that your players take on your personality. So our players took on Coach Weber's personality. And then the three of us took on Coach Weber's personality in our own individual way, and we were all different. And again, as I alluded to earlier, that you don't really know what you've got until you look back on it, sometimes a day ago or sometimes 20 years ago. And I did know at the time when I was an assistant with Chris Lowery and Matt Painter, it's like, man, these dudes know how to coach basketball. And I knew Coach Weber knew it. I guess one question I would have with this whole thing is what really made it fun. But I was really nervous when Coach Weber put in the summer workout program. I thought he announced these guys are coming back in the summer. I'm like, oh, we won't have anybody come the fall. And because it's something we had never done before. And Coach, when did you guys start doing that at Purdue? And what made you realize that that's what we had to do? And I felt that was a big part of building our culture. And now everyone's doing it today.
But I think the big thing, and I remember, and Matt was at Eastern Illinois, he replaced, my brother was there, and my brother always said it's not the same. He'd come to Purdue and watch practice, and he'd always say it's not the same at this level. And my whole thing was it had to be the same. We had to treat it like it was the Big Ten. And, we had our guys, the rules have changed. They could be there. They couldn't. They could, they could get jobs. Then they could start working camp. I don't know the timeline. I'm too old. It was 43 years all the way, along the time. But, we just felt it was important to get them in the weight room, to get them together, get them playing, all of that type of thing. Then later on, start working camp and all that stuff. But, that I thought that was just crucial and it still is. I just went to Matt's practice yesterday. I mean, the guys around there like, he's going 2 hours today. And it's like, this is summer, it's somebody said it's only July, but Matt's got a new young group and he has to set the tone with these guys and get them going hard and understand what it's about. And So, I think that's what we did. And I said earlier, that first group bought in. They, Kristen L, you could make them lift weights all day. And Ryan Hammer, all those guys did anything. And Monty, he was bouncing around somewhere like a jackrabbit, but he did what, he did the work, and it all kind of paid off, and we created that culture, and it just moved forward after that.
To kind of build on, obviously, the success of this program, and one of the reasons we're doing this podcast series is the success of the arena. And for 60 years, this will be the 60th year for the arena. Coach Weber, you touched up on how the difference was of your first initial games to, again, when you were on your way out. Coach Painter, obviously you coming here, taking over, and now you have an absolute amazing atmosphere every night with the paint crew in Mackey Arena. But for all of you, when you think of the arena, when was the time that you felt like this home court is amazing and it really made the switch to, wow, like this place is magical? And why, I think for a 7-year period, only lost 1 league game in the arena, which is just staggering.
Wow.
Well, I remember when Coach Aaron was there, we played Wichita State, and what I guess was probably going to be the night that we were going to win the league or not. And literally, I felt like when we walked out onto the court and the fans went so crazy, I literally felt like the arena truly was vibrating, shaking. I'm like, At the time, it was only about 25 years old. I'm thinking, I'm not sure how much longer the roof's staying on here. So I knew it was going to be that way. But as Coach alluded to in his first year, I remember when Monte dunked on the dude in the first half on the far baseline. Ed Hightower with his lower 2 fingers just told the guy from Creighton to get up, because that was clean, and that was pretty cold, by the way. And our place went nuts. And I'm like, yep, we still got it here in the arena. We can get this thing back.
Yeah, the games that jump out for me, and I think Coach Weber and CeeLo would agree with you. The first one especially, I don't know if you guys weren't here for the second one for me, and I know that's in my 6th year being there, is the Indiana game, and they were runner-up national champs. Like, they asked Mike Davis afterwards, like when did you know you were in trouble? And he says, when them damn fireworks went off. And he said those fireworks went off before the game. He says, I understand. And so, like, that was just to be able to beat a team of that caliber. And that goes to Kent, because, Kent, Dane Fife wouldn't let Kent breathe the year before. Kent was 2 for 6 in Bloomington. Like, for Kent Williams not to get off shots, like he shoots 15 times in his sleep, and rightfully so. And so, like, that game right there was big. Roland was so good in that game. Kent was so good in that game. But Dane Fife had a target on his back for 12 months. Like, Kent was that really would motivate Kent when somebody got the best of him. Then the other game for me is when we did the bracket buster and we played Hawaii, and it was 11 p.m. tip. I'm glad there was no breathalyzers in the gym. And I mean, it was on. I mean, these dudes were swinging from the rafters. It was crazy. And Hawaii was good. Hawaii was really, really good. And they outplayed us the whole game. And we got to a dead ball with about a minute and a half to go. And we just grinded them down and then just won it at the end. But it was a dead ball, and they're getting ready, and we're pressing, and we're up into them. And Tony Young puts his head on this guy's shoulder at a dead ball, like he was going to take a nap on his shoulder. And the guy jumped and freaked him out. And we laughed so hard during the game. And then Tony got a turnover. Like, he just freaked the guy out. But we just had unbelievable, like, JT and Tony Young, and like Lamar Owen would come off the bench. BT, Brian Turner was there. We had some guys that could put some pressure on the ball. And those guys, like Stetson, I don't even bring up Stetson and Darren. I mean, heck, and those guys were all defensive players of the year. We had like a collective of 5 guys that would just, I mean, it was unbelievable. But the crowd just went crazy in that game. We started the game at 11 p.m. and we finished it at 1. And so, like, those 2 games are the ones that jump out for me.
How about for you, Coach Lowery, when you think of your games as a player, to then when you came back as an assistant, of course, ultimately as a head coach, College Game Day ultimately ends up coming to Carbondale during your time as the head coach. I mean, describe really the differences and maybe even some of the similarities of what some of your really good environments you remember as a player, to then it really seemed like you guys took it to a whole nother level here when you came back as an assistant and ultimately head coach.
I think for me as a player, we had strong hate for Illinois State. And I mean, really, really strong hate. And one of their players drove everybody crazy. So beating them in the arena was always great. And for me, when I came back as an assistant, it was the Creighton game at home, and Kent. That was the Kyle Korver game, and we guarded them, and we figured out how to finally stop. Paint figured out how to guard what they do, and we finally got it right, and we swept them that year. But the game in Carbondale was crazy. I mean, and to hold Korver scoreless for a half, and then really get under his skin, and then for Kent to hit the bomb late. And I remember we went back and watched film, and like Payne said, Kent would shoot. He shot a lot for us. Kent shot a shot, and Jermaine was still posting up. And he didn't know if it went in or not, because Jermaine was still posting, hoping to get the ball, and it just goes over his head. And I think that was Jermaine's way of saying, "Hey, I'm open," and he didn't pass me the ball. And I hope you guys see that on film. But that game was so crazy, and I just remember Ken hit a pull up late, and I'm like, damn, that was a really hard shot. Like, the shots that he can make aren't characteristic of his athletic ability, and he's somebody that can get him off on dudes, and it was impressive. And I just remember that game, and then I remember, one of the other Creighton games, and when we hosted college game day, and having those guys on our campus and seeing our fans be able to embrace that. And Payne's had that, and he knows how important that is. And Coach Weber's had it too, Illinois, how important that is for your community and for your players. And we were the first mid-major to ever have it. And that speaks loudly of what the program had become. And just knowing that our fans made that place special. And we would just sit back, and there would be times when we know we're going to win. We know we're down with a minute left, but we're going to win. And having the confidence of knowing that you're going to win sometimes is better than your own talent. And I remember, me and Coach, we had just got smoked at Wisconsin, and we were going to go. Remember, we were going to fly down to the game to Carbondale, and I think it was the one where Sly hit they threw the long pass, and Sly hits the game winner. And that type of stuff is just what makes that place magical. Josh Warren, banking in a 3 to beat Missouri State, and him telling me you should let me shoot more threes. You're stupid, and this is directly, you're stupid for not letting me shoot more threes. And everybody on this call know he said that to me. So, those things happen there, and that's what made that place special during that time.
He was talking about the Creighton game, and I had the T-shirt. I got a chance to be around Kyle Korver. He was playing with Darren Williams with the Jazz, and I'd go out to the playoff games, and we go to dinner after. And Kyle said, "Coach, it's some of my best memories coming there." And he goes, "Do you have one of those T-shirts?" So I had to call Mike Reese to find one of the T-shirts, and I sent Kyle Korver the T-shirt. So not only it's great memories for us, but think about it. This is a guy that he's played in the NBA. He's been playoffs. He's done unbelievable things at Creighton, and he asked me for the T-shirt from Carbondale, and that it was special. And Matt talked about Indiana. Not only did Mike Davis said, "I knew we were in trouble," but he also said, "I thought we were playing the freaking Lakers," and with the fireworks and stuff. So it's it's cool. I just remember, just again from the beginning, where we had to beg people to come, and and then to the end where people were staying overnight to get into the arena, and that's what makes it special and rewarding.
When you think of the 10 total NCAA tournaments in program history for Southern Illinois, Coach Watson and Coach Lowery, both of you have been a part of 7 of those 10. And of course, Rodney, you as an assistant here, Coach Lowery, you as a player, assistant, and then ultimately as head coach. That's really a staggering number. There aren't very many people where you can look across the landscape in college basketball and see they are that tied to the program. I know that last Sweet 16 team for you, Coach Lowery, you talk about, man, we were Final Four good. Why did you feel that way? What was it about that team that year that you're like, we got the pieces to do what is the ultimate goal for everybody, as Coach Painter did this past year, being able to make it all the way to the Final Four.
I was so confident in that group, and just about their approach was so good. And Coach Washington talking about personalities, they really took on our personality as a group, that team. And that team had guys who had played with Kent, that had played with the guys who started it, and then played with the guys in the middle with Darren and Stetson, that leadership group. So you had Kent and Jermaine, and then you had Stetson and Darren, and then it became Jamal and Tony. So Jamal and Tony always felt slighted, like they didn't get enough love like the other guys. Those four guys were beloved, and those two guys felt like, we don't get as much love as those guys do for what we did. And they played that way with a chip on their shoulder. They loved the arena, man. Those dudes had great games in the arena, man. When I tell you, like special, like guys, good players are, deliver on the road, but Jamal Tatum had some unbelievable games in the arena where he just delivered in a big way. And from a standpoint of being prepared, ready to go, like that was the number one thing that Coach Weber established. And I think, Paint and myself took it and really ran. Being prepared to play was so important to the Salukis. Like, we wanted you to overstand our approach to how we were going to win. And that's how we made our players. We did stuff back then that really allowed them to flourish and understand what it meant to be a winner. And it wasn't just showing up and shooting the ball. It was the preparation it took. We really made those guys understand how hard our coaches prepared to win. It wasn't a fluke. It wasn't just their talent. It was a grouping of everything that we did to stop everything that they did, and yet still score on what they were going to do to stop us defensively. So that's the approach that I learned from Coach and Paint and the preparation side of things. And when I went to, during the Final Four, I went up in the suites with Purdue and watched those guys get ready for NC State, and just hearing them talk, I'm like, this is like 2001, 2002. Nothing's changed. Absolutely nothing has changed. It's just different people in the room. And to know that our how we win and how we do things, it doesn't matter the time period. It just matters about doing it right and presenting to the players and help them to understand how to win.
So you could talk to you guys all day. I know you don't have all day, so we'll get out everybody on this note and kind of want to go through the group with this, but tally the numbers for all of you. When you think of this group, 63 years combined as a head coach for everybody on this call, 1,340 wins combined for all of you as coaches. That's an average of 21 wins a season for you guys as head coaches. Coach Watson kind of alluded to, when you go through back in the day, like, do we have a good staff? Like, maybe we don't really know till later on, when you have seen all of you guys have the success that you have. Coach Painter just this year coached in a national title game. Coach Weber, you've had that experience as well at Illinois. What always really kind of sticks out to me from my seat, which I've only been here for a year, but is the amount of pride that all of you take in one another and how intently all of you follow each other still to this day. What does it mean, just as we kind of wrap this call up, what does it mean just to be a part of that group, to be a part of those numbers? I know it's about your players and you got to have help, and we've hinted all that all call, but to know this group has been able to go on to do those things as a head coach is pretty remarkable.
Yeah, for me, it's it's like, Coach Weber came 3 games away from 500. Like I was telling Chris last week, I had the schedule. I printed the schedule off, and when I watched it through the years, because I wanted him to get to 500, and I knew it was going to get close. And they were rolling for a while, and then they hit a tough patch. And so, like, that's just like more than anything, just wanting him to be, just wanting the people that have helped you. Because a lot of times what happens in this business is, like, I can't help Bruce Weber and I can't help Gene Cady because you can't pay back what they did for you. but you can help the next guy like they helped you, right? So like that's something for me. But I've always been like, I'm for people. Like I'm not against people. And so like when, Chris got the job at Northwestern, like they're good. Like Northwestern's really, really good. But they're not going to that NCAA tournament without Chris coming there and instilling that defensive system. They're just not. And they have good players. Now they're a two-way team. They're explosive offensively, but defensively, man, they got rules. They're set by it, and I see that. And so to me, when I'm watching it, I'm like, man, why did I call Chris Collins and tell him to hire Chris Lowery? This is ridiculous. And I was like, but like I see it, and I'm like there, and I'm always like, I look at things like that, and I'm like, well, why can't I be better? From a defensive standpoint, why can I so we learn from each other. Best way to put it. I still go to clinics. I still like call guys and ask them questions like I'm 24 years old because I don't want to be missing anything. I want to learn from things, but rooting for other people, whether it was, Coach Watson at Southern Indiana, like that's what it's about. You got to be for other people, especially the people that have been in your corner that you really can't repay. Like that's a hard piece because that's what you want to do. You want to repay those guys that helped you, but like they're ahead of you in the business. Like they've already done all those things. And but just very, very appreciative of where I am. Like, and I always say that about a player's game. It's a player's game. You can say what you want and you can like say nice things about us if you want to, but it doesn't get done without Darren Brooks and Stetson Harrison and Darren Williams and Luther Head and D Brown and Zach Edey. And, people don't realize, people on this call do, but Braden Smith's a killer. Braden Smith is somehow related to Kent Williams, somewhere along the line. There was something intertwined. But Kent Williams is a killer. Like Kent Williams wasn't trying to be your friend. He was not trying to be. Braden Smith is not trying to be your friend. Zach Edey wants nothing to do with being your friend at all. And that's what you got to have. Good character dudes that are talented, but they're killers, man. They're winners. And like, if you can find them, man, it's nothing like a good coach. Like CeeLo and I, we jumped on Coach Weber's back. Rodney, we jumped on Coach Weber's back. We rode him. But every coach has rode right players. People said, oh man, you guys did great. You went to the Final Four. Yep. Because of Zebo. Like he set the tone. Like he set the tone for all of us. Like I just laugh. I'd go into those games, say, they're going to play post D this way. We're going to win this game. This pizza is going to taste great after the game. Because you can't handle it. When you get against a great dude, like, and you can't handle Darren Williams or Luther Head or D Brown, it's over. I remember Coach Weber talking about like, I had to like get after those guys and say like, and give them different goals. Like you need to win by 35. I'm like, who in the hell says you got to win by 35? Like, but they were so good that you had to give them different challenges because that's just the way it is. And that's the whole thing, man. You got to get players, but you also have to have structure and, you have to have accountability. And that's why today's landscape stinks because it's devaluing education and it's not instilling like the discipline, man, I needed Purdue so bad. I just didn't realize it because I thought I had all the answers. Hell, I still think I have all the answers, but like that piece of it, you don't understand the mindset of young people, man. They need to be set. They need to be set into structure. They need to be set into discipline. And with that being said, I don't think anybody has more fun than we did at Southern Illinois or we have at Purdue right now. We make our hard work fun, but like you can't have clowns and you can't have guys just jumping all over the place, just worried about their roles and shooting and all that. It's a winning game and everybody sacrifices. And I feel fortunate because I learned from the best.
What's interesting about when I hear Matt talk and everybody else, but it's amazing how much success we had when something didn't go like we wanted. As an example, the 07 team, which arguably is one of the best teams ever play at SIU. And a lot of that started because we got beat by Arkansas and Florida. Then we ended up beating Virginia Tech. Matt, you might want to tell the story about Blake Ahern's recruiting and how we kind of thought we had him, but then I guess we didn't. Yeah. And we were maybe a little frustrated more than maybe Coach Weber. But then in the long run, that led to Jamal Tatum coming to campus. Yeah. So it's really interesting and same thing happened with me at Southern Indiana. I remember when Coach Weber first got there and Matt got there, it seemed like every time there was a storm, the flight from St. Louis to Marion got canceled. We had to drive and go get them. We're thinking, that drive's going to kill us. Those guys, we're going to go through Pinckneyville and Nashville, and that's not going to work. And But then when there was great weather and they came in, it was different. Every time it seemed like the flight was canceled to Marion, we got the dude. The time everything went perfect, the weather was great, that guy didn't show up on our campus, and who knows what the good Lord had in mind for that. So, Matt, why don't you remind us of how the Blake Ahern thing really happened?
Yeah, well, it started off, because we ended up getting Jamal Tatum, but I remember CeeLo and I talking about, CeeLo was like, should we go in there? Should we not go in there? And CeeLo had recruited Jamal Tatum really hard, but CeeLo goes in on the last day by himself, and he's talking to Matt Doherty from North Carolina. And he calls me back. It's like, great visit. I love him. But man, don't know if we can beat the Tar Heels. And so we probably wasted our time there. But you never know. Like Coach Weber would always talk about that. You never know, man. You just got to get your line in the water. And then with Blake Ahern, he committed, and then Missouri State offered on the way home, and he was starting hedging his bets. And we'd worked him. Chris and I had worked him really hard, man. And we had him in line. This is a guy that ends up having just an unbelievable professional career. And so you keep moving. The other thing about it is obviously we get JT. We bring JT in on a Thursday of Labor Day weekend and try to get that Thursday night before people, take off. I remember that vividly. And then being able to get him, and Chris did a great job recruiting him. And we're sitting there, but we also were sitting, there was another kid that had a great career at Ohio from Indianapolis Rebuff named Sonny Troutman. So those were the three guys at that time. How I can remember that proves I'm a loser. And so that was it. We had it lined, man. We had it lined. We might get Blake Ahern. If we don't, we got JT. Sonny scored 1,500 points at Ohio. He went to the same high school as one of my assistants here, so I knew him. And we were just on it. We were on top of it. We were some letter writing fools where it mattered. CeeLo would have a stack every day, man. We were I wore Matt Shaw out. I wore him out. We had recruited Randall. I sent stuff to Randall Falker. I misspelled his first and last name. And then and he went to some high school. I still don't know where he went to high school. I don't know, St. Louis Arts of Math Science or something. I don't even know. But getting guys like that, Randall Falker was fabulous. Matt Shaw was big time. But we were just on top of it. And then St. Louis was big time. I love St. Louis, the city. I mean, St. Louis was big time to us. And the people that were over there with the Eagles, now Bradley Beal, with Gateway, those guys treated us like gold, man. They knew we treated once they found out we treated their players right, but we held them accountable and they got their degrees. And they just finally said, the Eagles guys were just if they can't go high major, why shouldn't they go to your place? They all end up playing in the NCAA tournament. They all end up graduating. Most of them end up all conference. And then Coach Weber reeled off all that with Stetson and DB and Brian Turner and, all those guys that played there, Kent, they all coached. And so, you have that, influence on them, but just some really cool times.
You forget about is Jermaine Dearman. Probably Ball State would have had him, but then they took that other kid from Florida and we ended up getting them. And
yep, they sure did.
So a lot of things happen and you're fortunate. And, for me, just, Matt talked about repaying and stuff. I think the thing you do when you repay is you have success and you've done it right. And whether it's Matt, Chris, Rodney, there's nothing more proud for me to watch those guys and have success. I'm on the Big Ten Network and I got to be neutral for everybody, but deep down, I'm sitting in that green room and I'm cheering for Purdue and I'm cheering for Northwestern. And, it's hard, but, it's just to watch everyone's success and Kent Williams winning a state championship. And, it's cool to see the guys have success. And again, not of all of them, Coach Sly has done unbelievable as a dad, as his profession. And so those, Chris Tennell, Ryan Hammer could buy us all. And he's doing pretty well. So all those guys having a success, that's repaying it. But it all started with Coach Katie, giving me a chance. And then obviously I having Matt play for us and then Matt coming with us and then I turned down Chris the first time. He'll never let me forget that. So, it's just great how things worked out. And it was a special time. I've said it many times on here. There's no more rewarding times in my career than the times we spent at SIU.
I mean, for me, Coach Heron is directly responsible for the start of my career because both of the guys I went to work for played for him, high school. So Coach Wills and Coach Corn both, been high school guys. So having but the longevity of my career is because of these three guys right here on this call, and with Coach Watson having, playing for him and working with him. I still never call him Rodney. It's still Coach Watson because, I didn't like him because of conditioning back in the day. He was mean and made us made us run the football stadium steps all the time because of the guys I played with. But being seeing Matt, grow into one of the best coaches in college basketball, and then being with Coach Weber for all those years, and being a part of really good teams. And when you're growing up as a coach, you don't think about conference championships and what that means. And Coach really instilled in me that winning a conference championship, and you obviously want to go to the Final Four, but that long haul of the season and going and playing people twice and beating them or sweeping them or splitting, and then you're crowned the champion of the league. That is a special, special thing, man. And I just remember, when I went in the Hall of Fame at SIU, and a lot of the former players came back and they all had the rings on. And that's when I knew. I was like, Jermaine had both of his, and it's just like, these guys, this means a lot to them. And, it's hard to explain how I feel about the place, and it's hard to explain how I feel about these guys. And, it's one of those deals where you're very fortunate and blessed to be in a coaching family, because not everybody has people they can lean on or people they could talk to about everything in the industry. And it's horrible right now. Like Coach Painter says, it's different. It's transactional. There's no love in coaching. There's no love in like the recruiting process of getting to know a family, and the upbringing and where they came from, and where, it's about what's the number right now. And that's not a good thing. But to come up how I came up, I wouldn't change a thing, and I wouldn't change, anything that happened to me as a coach, because I did it with good people, and that's all it's about.
Well, I know Saluki fans remember all these memories very well, and they are so appreciative of each of you guys and cheer for all of you, especially with what you guys continue to do today with Coach Lowery and Coach Painter still continuing to coach. Gentlemen, thank you so much for your time. We appreciate it, and we hope you enjoyed going down memory lane with all of us today.
Thank you.
Thank you.
There is a ton more that we can recap, but these are the numbers that speak volumes of how great these coaches were. Mention the numbers: 64 total seasons as a head coach. Chris Lowery, 8 all at Southern Illinois. Matt Painter, 21, SIU and Purdue. Coach Weber, with time, of course, at Southern Illinois, back in the Big Ten with Illinois, and then the Big 12 with Kansas State. Rodney Watson, all 11 seasons he had as a head coach were at Southern Indiana in the Division II level. D2 and D1 NCAA tournament appearances, 38 combined NCAA tournaments out of those 64 possible years. Half the time, these guys were competing in postseason play. That's remarkable. 6 combined conference tournament titles. The only one to win an Arch Madness title was Chris Lowery as the head coach for the Dogs. You look at Final Fours. 3 Final Fours as head coaches. Coach Weber with Illinois, Coach Painter just this past year with Purdue, and then Rodney, Coach Watson with Southern Indiana, taking him to the D2 Final Four. And then conference regular season championships. 14 combined regular season championships. Coach Weber won 2 of each. 2 Big 12, 2 Big 10, and then 2 Valley titles. Coach Painter, his lone year at Southern, and still counting at Purdue with those 5 Big 10 crowns. And then Chris Lowery winning 2 regular season championships with Southern Illinois as the head coach of the Dogs. Unreal conversation. And if you've just listened to the audio version of this podcast, added some as we call in the business, B-roll and some footage of their time together. I think it's worth another watch if you have some time on the video side for this podcast. In closing, can't thank Coach Painter, Coach Weber, Coach Watson, and Coach Lowery enough for, one, taking the time to do it. Those guys are busy. Even Coach Weber doing television in retirement. Coach Watson mowing all of his yards, as we have grown accustomed to. And, of course, Coach Painter and Coach Lowery still in the thick of it, coaching for their respective programs. We got plenty more coming throughout this Saluki basketball season, and we hope you check back in with us for some future episodes. This has been Echoes of the Arena, 60 years of Banterra Center magic.
The preceding has been a Learfield presentation on the Saluki Sports Network.